Hey, my name is Israel Portnoy and we are sitting in the hills of Jerusalem. This is Bet Meir specifically. I am very lucky that I live right here. I'm an artist, more specifically a singer, songwriter, producer. I moved to Israel when I was 16. I originally came from Manchester, England, more specifically Hale Barnes, England. I came here originally to study in yeshiva. I wasn't particularly good at Talmud, so I ended up playing guitar most of the day. Growing up in a very musical household, there were 9 kids. My dad was a musician turned rabbi, and I guess that coupled with the fact that the weather in England was pretty dire, there was a lot of staying indoors, playing music happening throughout my childhood. So naturally I sort of gravitated towards that. And I guess I was really lucky that it kind of quickly turned into something that I saw could also be a source of, my living. Played at someone's wedding ceremony when I was very young. They paid me some money. I was like, okay, I could get used to this. I've been writing songs since I was about 6 years old, to be specific. We have a cassette that my brother found of a little recording of me writing something on the piano, and that's probably where I feel most at home, true to my, what we would say in Hebrew, tafkid, my role in this world, is when I'm interacting with humans through music, or music through humans. I think those two things are beautiful and they work very well together. So that's really nice to be involved with something which universally speaks to everyone. So I would say the point in my life where I realised that music could actually be my passion and my purpose, the thing that I was lucky enough to be able to make a living off. Well, I would split it into two. I would say the spark of when it was like, this is even a possibility in the universe, would be when I was first paid to sing at a wedding ceremony. I don't think I definitely wasn't even aware that I was going to be paid for it. It was more like someone asked me to sing some songs. I love singing songs, I'll sing some songs. And then afterwards they gave me, 100 quid or whatever it was. I don't remember, honestly, it was so long ago. But in that moment I realised that I have something which is of value for other people. And the fact that this was also something which I thoroughly enjoyed didn't diminish that. I think culturally, when I was growing up, we were kind of taught that there was like business and pleasure, and those two things were very much separate. You kind of have to hate your job, you have to be angry at the end of the day, and then you're going to do the things that you actually enjoy. And I think the privilege of being born into this generation is that more and more we're realizing that those things can be combined. And for me that was a big moment, realizing I could do both. They could be one and the same. I think the point where it actually materialized into being one and the same was probably in my late teens. I started playing Jewish weddings in Israel and playing for tour groups of, particularly Christian tour groups, actually visiting Israel, doing some interfaith work, which is also something I'm very passionate about, and realizing that I was paying my bills with this. So, and obviously my bills at the time were, rent and some hummus and pita or chicken wings. It was a pretty simple life, still is a simple life. I was able to with God's help, to do that. So that was my realization that I was going to ramp it up and kind of head as hard in that direction as I could. So I was playing a gig in Mike's Place, which is an American style sports bar / music venue in Jerusalem, and my wife was on a birthright trip and I went out for like a set break or something. I met her outside of Mike's Place, and that was probably about 9 years ago, and we got married about 3 years after I met her, I just became a dad about 9 or 10 months ago, which has just been the most incredible, life-changing experience. I now totally feel that I identify as a dad first and foremost, before identifying as an artist, which is something that I never thought I would say. The art was very much like the all-encompassing identity. But then again, I guess they are the same thing, like they are both forms of creation. She's definitely the best art I've ever created. In fact, I'm actually going to put out a little EP with like 4 or 5 tracks in a couple months on her first birthday, just because I was writing songs for her naturally to try and calm her down, or like at the beginning stages when it was like the 3 a.m. figuring out how to get a baby to sleep. I never in my wildest dreams intended for that the songs would be something of any kind of commercial, it was more just like it has value to me and for her, and it was our little connection. But I started realizing that this stuff ironically was probably the most sort of catchy, simple music that I'd written thus far. Why not put it out there? Some of the things that give me inspiration when I'm songwriting are nature, which is why I choose to live in this stunning place and always have chosen, little Moshavim to live in. It's kind of unpredictable. Like, I think that's part of what makes the mystery. It's like it could be a phone conversation with a friend and they say something and I'm like, oh, that's a great hook. Or it could just be a melody line at 2 a.m. that kind of just pops into your head, or you're messing around on an instrument. Sometimes it's honestly the things which are almost so glaringly obvious that you wouldn't think to do anything with it, but those things are more often than not the very things that we collectively empathize with, we collectively feel, we collectively relate to. And I think that is, it's not the only way to write songs, and it's not, but if you want to write something which can connect with as many people as possible, I think that is the route to go. I also would say the older I get, the more I realize that, like any job, you can't wait for the inspiration to just hit you in the face and be like, okay, now I'm going to write a song. It's something that you have to do every single day. It's a muscle that you have to exercise and build, and you just have to do a lot of it to get good at it. So it's also important to incorporate just some kind of disciplined a regimen, like something which will keep you doing it even if you don't feel like doing it. On the other hand, I think that there is a different approach that someone else might say, whereby it's like they don't write lots of music, they wait till that one song comes out. I think there have been writers in history who haven't necessarily made their writing success through doing a lot of it, but I think more often than not, most people have made successful songwriting careers by doing a lot of the very thing that they're trying to do in songwriting. I think AI and the influence that it has on the arts, and more specifically for this conversation, music, is wild. You don't need me to tell you that. That's blindingly obvious at this point. It's pretty wild, I guess, across all industries. Most recently, even this ChatGPT thing, like asking it to write a song, then asking it to add chords, then I was asking it to, write me a more jazzy chord progression, and it just gets it, and it's just like, boom, it's doing it. It's wild what it can bring to the table in a scary way, and also it's like, at what point is it no longer art? At what point is it not my self-expression, but it's an augmented state of expression, which is kind of like highly relying on non-humans? I don't know. I'm so torn about how I feel about it, if I'm being honest. I'm still figuring it out, but I think exploration with it is a no-brainer. Whatever conclusion I may or may not get to at the end is less relevant than being in the process of trying these things, trying to figure out how it interacts with the artist, how a robot essentially interacts with a human to create something human. in this case art, is definitely blown open already and will continue to do so. It's blown open the playing field. You no longer have to be someone who understands the mechanics of a chord progression, of why certain chords go with each other, what key center they are related to, because there's all kinds of programs that will throw out a random chord progression to you, and if you don't like it, you'll ask it to throw out a different one. And there's kids all over the world making music. The younger me might have said, "Oh, this is ridiculous, you know, I've spent my whole life for the last 20 odd years working really hard to understand music and get better at it, and now there's people who can make music from their iPads and they can't even necessarily sing a melody line or be able to explain the relationship between two chords." But to be honest, I think that's just a very sort of immature outlook. And really, when I think about it, if it's creating more, first of all, if it's creating more music in the world, then that's great. So I guess AI, more specifically, you know, I was talking about it on a macro level, but really like on a day-to-day level. Just the other day, I was doing these like short form covers on social media, just as a way of kind of interacting with the audience, essentially in between promoting my original music. And I did a song in Hebrew. There's an auto lyric option, and it didn't realize this was not English, so it was guessing essentially English lyrics to a Hebrew song, and it ended up just being something that had me laughing really hard, and just, it was pretty funny. And I was like, well, you know what, maybe other people find this funny, I'm going to share this, and indeed other people found it funny. And now it's turned into this thing that I do once a week. I called it Silly Subtitle Sundays. And I mean, that's just, I guess, a very small, tiny idea of something coming as a result of technology, of AI, which otherwise wouldn't have existed. It was something which I connected with my audience on. It was entertaining, provided people with a little chuckle, and I guess just another example of something which came about due to technology and music together. Ultimately, if I had to decide between the social media, online, digital space and music for people in a live setting, for me it's very obvious that I would choose the latter. I don't think there's another life experience that for me makes me feel more connected with my role as a human almost than playing real music for real people. That is something just like electrifying about that, which has always, since I was a kid until today, just does something for me which is, it's actually completely unexplainable. And that's where I feel most at home. That's where I feel most like this is, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing the thing. You know, to be honest, I don't feel necessarily that I do connect as well from behind the camera as I do in real life. It creates a certain barrier that, as long as I've been doing it for, still feels secondary to the real thing. And that's okay, you know, I don't think I need to beat myself up about that. One is a means to the other, and yes, ultimately, if I didn't have to do social media, I wouldn't do it. I absolutely wouldn't do it. Now, in 5 years, I see myself doing exactly what I'm blessed to do today. Wake up, create music, produce music for myself and for other people, and at night have an electrifying human experience through the medium of music with other humans. Doing the same thing I'm doing now, but on a much bigger level, perhaps with a little bit more strategy surrounding it. I think as an independent, you know, self-employed artist, part of the challenge is you're wearing so many hats all the time. You know, you're the admin guy and the producer and the music producer and the video. It's like there's just so many elements. Then there's marketing and there's branding and there's social media. It's never ending. I think in the next 5 years I would love to have a team to enable me to focus more on the art and less on the surrounding parts of it. My advice to a young musician starting in Israel would be to do something which I didn't do enough of, which is to reach outside of your comfort zone and collaborate with people who are doing very different things to you musically, and figure out a way of making those things work together. I think that's such a beautiful part of music, which is that, like any language, each style of music has its own lingo, its own phrases, its own, catchphrases. And even though they're all different languages, there are certain things that they all kind of meet on. And those are the things that unite the people listening to it. And the differences are the things which give each one its unique voice. And I think that's a really beautiful way of connecting to a different audience you otherwise wouldn't have necessarily connected to or been connected with. And also, more importantly, is a way of creating art which goes beyond the kind of boundaries that you've set for yourself subconsciously up until this point, because those boundaries are created by what you know and do as a musician. So as soon as you bring someone else into the picture and you paint with them, then the result of that art is obviously going to be something which is far broader and more inclusive and more encompassing of a wider variety of culture. So basically collaborate. That was a very simple way of just saying collaborate. Collaborate with other artists who do different things to you.